Hi, everyone. My name is Jeff Gramlich.
And I'm John Lee.
We're with the Hoops Tax Institute at Washington State University. And we're going to do a short presentation called Getting Your Maximum Tax Refund as a College Student. John, how did you get into this?
Well, I read a notice from the IRS that said millions of students every year are not maximizing this tax credit. So we figured, hey, why don't we make a video so we can help students get more money back from the IRS?
Great. And so how to, and this slide here says something about you can get up to $2,500 in terms of a credit. And credits are direct reductions of your tax as opposed to a deduction that reduces your income. So this is even better than a deduction.
Yep. And so the government will, and this is based on your tuition expenses. So if a student's paid tuition and they have more tuition than scholarships, they get this credit up to $2,500. And even if they don't owe tax,
Is it more tuition than scholarships or more scholarships than tuition?
well, to get this credit, you have to have more tuition than scholarships.
Okay.
And we'll talk about how students may miss this, even if they have more scholarships than tuition.
I see.
We'll go through that scenario, but this is based on your net tuition expenses.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Okay. So even it says here that you can make a $2,500 tax. You can get a $2,500 tax credit, but that assumes that you actually pay tax and you worked. But what if you didn't work?
So if you didn't work, there's still a $1,000 refundable credit. So
Wow. And you don't have to pay tax on that.
exactly, it's free money.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so and that's what we're hoping we can help students to maximize this refund.
Okay, and let's talk about some of the requirements here. Does this apply to every kind of education out there? And
So
all of the education that you can have, or are there limitations on this?
there are limitations. So the first one is you can't take the credit if you have already completed your first 4 years of post-secondary education. So first 4 years after high school, which is generally your bachelor's degree.
Right.
So
But it doesn't have to be a bachelor's degree. I mean, you can be working at a community college and you still take this, right?
exactly. So as long as it's a qualified educational institution, this still applies. And there's more information in the instructions for Form 8863 online.
So that's this form, and all you have to do is just type in your Google search bar, type Form 8863, and the IRS form will come up, and the instructions for it will be there too as well. So you can look it up and dig in it to your heart's content. But
Yeah.
we're going to still try to summarize the main things here.
Mhm.
You have to be seeking a degree. You can't just be taking extra classes. But
Yep.
for most people, they are if they're in their first 4 years.
Mhm.
I have to be at least half-time enrollment, and there's something about an income limitation.
Yeah, there's a calculation of what's called modified adjusted gross income. So if you're single and you have $90,000 of this modified adjusted gross income, you can't take the credit. Or if you're married, filing a joint return, the limit is 180,000.
What if you're a dependent of your parents? I mean, they're still paying for everything for you. Can they take the credit?
That's exactly it. So if you're a dependent of your parents, you can't take the credit, but your parents can, which can be great to, I mean, so the student doesn't miss out on that refund because their parents can.
Just because their parents are sort of claiming and supporting them, right?
Yep, exactly.
And here's this slide. I think is really pretty interesting. What is it telling us?
So, and this came out back in 2015, I think, but it still applies today. That the IRS came out and said that millions of students are missing this credit every year, or they're not just missing it, but failing to maximize it. And that's kind of the point of this presentation. Is many of you have probably already taken this credit in the past, but we're going to show you how you can maximize this credit purely based on if you have Pell Grants and scholarships.
And by the way, if I understand it, you can go back and refile your up to 3 years back. If you've been getting this and say, oh wow, I wish I had thought of this, or I wish I had known about this, you can go back and get refunds for earlier years that up to the 3 previous years, right?
Yep, exactly.
Wow. Oh, that's pretty cool. And you do an amended tax return for that, right?
Yep.
Okay. So you get this form every year from the university, and what's important about this form?
Okay, so this is what's called the 1098T tuition statement, and everyone.
This is 1098T right here.
And this is received. All students that attend a university or college, pay tuition, are going to receive this form. They're required. The university is required to file this with the IRS and send it to the student. So what it has is in box 1. In this example, it's showing $11,041. That is the amount of tuition and fees that the student paid for the year.
Okay. And then there's this other box, box 5.
Yep, and box 5 is the total of scholarships and grants that the student received.
Okay. All right. So in this particular case, the student actually got more in scholarships and grants than the tuition, and presumably the extra goes to things like room and board, right?
Yep, exactly. So the credit, you can see at the bottom of this slide, to calculate this credit, you take your tuition paid, which is box 1, and you subtract box 5, your scholarships and grants, and that equals your qualified education expenses. So that's the number that is used for the credit.
Oops, sorry, folks. Okay, so but in this case, 11,041 is less than 12,000. So I guess that means that you can't get any credit, right?
That's what most people think, and that's what most people miss. And that's why we're doing this. So especially if if your tuition statement looks like this, there's a good chance you missed out on money that the IRS could owe you.
And it's just the way you fill out the form. It's not, you don't have to do anything during the year different. It's actually, you can do this as you're filling out the form, right?
Exactly. And what's amazing is that if you file on TurboTax, this is easy to miss, or if even CPAs miss the allocation that you can make here. So this is we'll show you how that's done.
Okay, let's get into it. So in this case, we're at a negative 959. So you get, if you just file the form that way, you'll get an American Opportunity Credit of 0, but there's something that you can do to fix this, right?
That's right.
Okay. So how do we maximize this credit?
So that scholarship and grant box 5 that we saw on the previous slide, that's
this 12,000.
The 12,000. So what we can do is, if you can allocate a portion of that amount to your income. So in this case, in this example, we wouldn't receive, the student who filed this form would not have received the American Opportunity Credit because they had more scholarships and grants than tuition. But if they decide to allocate a portion of those scholarships to income and recognize it as income on their return.
Wait a second, that's bad, isn't it?
You would think it was bad, right? And most of the time.
So that means taking some number like $4,000 or something like that of this 12,000 in box 5 and actually putting it on as taxable income, right?
That's exactly it. And the reason that's not a bad thing, it seems bad at first. You're thinking, why do I want to recognize more income? That means I pay more tax. But the way this credit works is, you get this $2,500 credit for the amount of income tax you'll pay is likely much smaller than the credit you're going to receive.
Right. And nowadays with a pretty high standard deduction that everybody gets, or at least, and depending on whether you're a dependent of somebody else, that your parents are going to get. So it may not work out that way. And in fact, we think that the majority of the time, it makes a lot more sense to allocate some of this $12,000 of scholarships and grants and put it on your tax return as income, right?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
So, but there are rules with this allocation. Okay, so we're saying to maximize this credit, you need to allocate part of your scholarships and grants to income. But what are the limitations to this? One of them is the scholarship or grant cannot be specifically set apart for tuition and fees.
So that's only for the part that you want to reallocate,
Exactly.
right? So in this case, we go back to this $12,000, and let's say we want to reallocate, is it 4,000?
Yeah, in this case, we would want to allocate
4,959.
4,950.
4,000, and so that we get this, this box one to be $4,000, exactly $4,000 greater than this box. And the way you do that is by taking $4,000 out of this and putting it into income.
Yep, exactly.
And if you do that, then you're going to maximize this credit. But that $4,959 must be related to scholarships or grants, and that includes Pell Grants, that are not restricted to only scholarships, books, and fees. It's got to be more flexible than that, right?
Yep. And the thing is, the federal Pell Grants, those are always, they're not limited.
Yeah, there's
So,
no limitation on that. They can go for room and board, and so you can reallocate those to income as much as you want. I mean,
so
don't do any more than you need to.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But yeah, if you do have federal Pell Grants, this definitely applies to you.
Okay. So, how do you do this in terms of the TurboTax? Because a lot of people, I know I use TurboTax.
Yep.
When it comes up and they say that they ask you a question, right? What's that question that?
So what you'll do is in software programs like TurboTax, they'll have you enter your 1098-T information. So if we
Coming off of that,
Yep.
off of this form.
So you'll see this exact form. You'll fill out the filer's name, where you received it from, and you'll put in your tuition and your scholarships.
Right.
So, but then TurboTax will ask a question afterward, which this question is important because this is how you can allocate the money to income, or the scholarships or grants to income. They'll ask you, were any of the scholarships or grants used for room and board?
Any of the box 5 scholarships and grants used for room and board? Most people say, well, no, it was all used for tuition, books, and fees, because they're afraid that, oh, well, this is going to be taxed, right?
Yep.
And it turns out that that's not the right answer.
Mm-hmm.
It may not, depending on your facts, it may not be the right answer for you. You should answer, well, yes. All right. Some of this scholarships and grants is unrestricted. It's not restricted to tuition, books, and fees.
Yep, exactly. So,
And if you answer that question yes, then you have an opportunity to reallocate some of this box 5 to taxable income.
yep, that's exactly it.
Okay. So do we need to look at this slide anymore other than to see the form and do that? Is there?
I think just to mention that it can be complicated how it works. Well, it seems simple overall, but you want to make sure you qualify for it. So just reviewing the instructions and publication 970, if you have questions, is important just to make sure you qualify for it. But the majority of students that are undergrads are going to qualify.
Right. And so for this IRS form 8863, it's important to know that you can also get specific instructions for that form. So it's not just the form and publication 970, but there's instructions. And just type in Google instructions for form 8863 and you'll get those instructions.
Yep.
You want to go through this example?
Yeah, let's do the example. So we've talked about the first example a bit, but the scholarships and grants exceeded the actual tuition expenses. So
it appears that you wouldn't get any money for your credit.
Exactly.
No credit. Oh, well, I'm not going to get anything. But look what happens when we change things around a little bit.
Yep. So this is our original example, and then we'll move on to, now what we're going to do is, it appears the student doesn't qualify, and you can see, but if a portion of the Pell Grants and scholarships could be allocated to income, then the student would likely see an increase in their tax refund. So
right. So you're going to say, yes, some of those scholarships and grants were not restricted to just tuition, books, and fees.
Exactly. Yep. And so this is what it looks like in the background. If you were on TurboTax and you answered yes to that question, then you'd say how much was used for room and board. And in this case, to maximize your credit, you want to have a difference between tuition and scholarships of $4,000. So you can see, in order to get that difference, we subtracted $4,959 from box 5, and you can see there's an arrow, and we're putting that on line 1 of the tax return. We're adding that to our total income. And then
so what you have to do is make sure that box 1 is exactly $4,000 greater than box 5.
Yep.
And you need to reallocate the difference between what was originally here, 12,000 and 7,041, because that's the $4,000. So in this case, it's going to be $4,959 has to be taken to income.
Yep, exactly.
Got it.
And again, I want to reiterate that the scholarship or grant has to be, it can't be restricted to tuition and fees. You don't want to get in trouble for allocating scholarships and grants that you're not allowed to allocate. So you'll want to go back and check on that. But if it's Pell Grants, you're okay. But other scholarships you may have received, you just double check the statement that you received when you got the scholarship to make sure you can allocate it.
So if you got a $5,000 Pell Grant, this student does, then you're clear, right? You can just take that $4,959 of the Pell Grant and call it income, and then you're going to get a nice credit. Let's see how that works.
So
okay.
If we just go back up, it's not so by allocating the 4,000, your credit is going to be, you're going to receive the credit up to 2,500. And 1,000, if this student owed zero tax, they're going to get $1,000 back. Plus, they'll get back whatever they paid in tax during the year that was withheld for the most part. So
up to 2,500.
Yeah. So I mean, I've seen in last year I saw maybe 5 or 6 of these that probably got 1,000 or more back a piece.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That is so cool. And as we said earlier, you can go back and refile for up to 3 years back. And amend those returns and get a nice big refund.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. Some things we want to talk about here. This is a real simplified version. We're just providing this information, saying, hey, it's an alert. Go out and make sure you follow the law, and if necessary, get the tax consultant. We're just making a video here.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Okay. Yeah, and we did talk about income limitations, and make sure that it truly is income that is not restricted, that you're to tuition, books, and fees, that you're reclassifying as income onto your tax return, because you can't do it if it's truly just for scholarships, books, and fees, for tuition, books, and fees. Okay, hey, thanks for listening.